The collision alarm screamed through the cockpit as Ethan Cross fought against the controls. His survey vessel spiraled through layers of prismatic fog, the navigation systems useless against whatever energy field surrounded this uncharted moon. Metal groaned, sparks erupted from the console, then everything went dark. When consciousness returned, pain lanced through his ribs. Ethan blinked at an alien sky where three suns painted the horizon in shades of amber and violet. The wreckage of his ship smoldered nearby, half buried in what looked like crystalline sand that chimed softly in the breeze. He tried to sit up and gasped. Definitely broken ribs. Maybe a concussion. His emergency beacon flickered weakly, damaged but functional. Help would come eventually, if he survived that long. Through the shimmering mists, a figure emerged. Ethan's breath caught. She moved like flowing water, her form humanoid but unmistakably otherworldly. Her skin held an opalescent quality, and intricate silver markings traced patterns down her neck and disappeared beneath simple woven fabric. But it was her eyes that arrested him, deep pools that seemed to contain swirling galaxies, changing from violet to silver to deep blue as she approached. She knelt beside him, tilting her head with curiosity. Then she smiled. That smile hit him like a physical force, warm, knowing, as if she recognized him from some half-remembered dream. She said something in a melodic language that sounded like wind chimes, then gently pressed her palm against his forehead. Ethan should have been afraid, should have pulled away. Instead, he felt an inexplicable trust as warmth radiated from her touch, easing the sharp edges of his pain. She helped him sit, moving with careful strength. Her silver markings pulsed with soft light as she supported his weight. When their eyes met again, that mysterious smile deepened, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a strange recognition he couldn't explain. She gestured toward the mists, her meaning clear. "Come with me." Ethan had no better options. His ship was destroyed, his supplies limited, and this beautiful stranger was his only chance at survival. He nodded, letting her guide him to his feet. As they walked into the luminous fog together, her shoulder supporting his, Ethan wondered why being near her felt less like meeting someone new and more like coming home to someone he'd known forever. The crystalline caves appeared through the mist like something from a fever dream. Bioluminescent plants clung to the walls, casting everything in soft azure and emerald light. The air inside felt thick with moisture and something else, an energy that made his skin tingle. She settled him on a bed of moss that felt impossibly soft, then disappeared deeper into the caves. Ethan examined his surroundings, noting the careful arrangement of objects, carved bowls, woven fabrics, collected crystals. Someone lived here. She lived here, alone in this ethereal beauty. When she returned, she carried clay vessels filled with glowing substances. She knelt beside him again, those galaxy eyes questioning. He understood. She was asking permission. He nodded, and she began gently treating his wounds. Her touch was impossibly gentle as she applied the luminous salve to my cuts. Wherever it touched, warmth spread through my skin, and the pain receded like a tide. I watched her face as she worked, the concentration in her expression, the way her markings brightened with each careful movement, the small furrow between her brows when she found a deeper injury. She glanced up and caught me staring. That smile returned, softer now, almost shy. She placed her hand over my heart for just a moment, and I felt my pulse quicken beneath her palm. Her markings flared brighter, and her eyes widened slightly, as if she'd felt it too. Then she pulled back, that knowing smile playing at her lips again, leaving me to wonder what had just passed between them.
The twin suns rose over the crystalline caves, painting everything in rose and gold. Ethan woke to find Naya. He had decided to call her that after she'd touched her chest and made a sound like flowing water, sitting at the cave entrance, silhouetted against the dawn. She turned when she heard him stir, and that radiant smile bloomed across her face. She stood gracefully, moving to help him up even though his ribs already felt remarkably better. Her healing salves worked like nothing from Earth. Naya gestured excitedly toward the cave mouth, clearly wanting to show him something. Ethan followed and gasped. Beyond the caves stretched a forest unlike anything he'd imagined. Trees with translucent trunks that sang in harmonic frequencies, their crystalline branches heavy with luminous fruit. Floating flower pods drifted through the air like lazy jellyfish, trailing tendrils of light. She led him into this wonderland, pointing out various plants and creatures. When she showed him how to harvest nectar from the floating pods, their hands touched as they both reached for the same blossom. Naya's fingers lingered against his, warm and soft, and Ethan felt that strange electricity again, that sense of connection he couldn't name. She laughed, a sound like bells, and squeezed his hand before letting go. But Ethan noticed her silver markings had flared bright at the contact. Over the following days, they developed their own language. Naya would trace patterns in the crystalline sand, and Ethan would nod or shake his head. He sketched pictures of his ship, his homeworld, the stars he'd traveled. She watched with rapt attention, sometimes reaching out to touch the drawings as if she could feel the meaning beneath them. She showed him how to navigate the mists, how to find water in the singing pools, how to coax the cave lights brighter with gentle touches. And always there were those moments, hands brushing during shared meals, her steadying touch on his shoulder as they climbed rocky paths, the way she'd tuck a strand of his hair back when the wind blew it across his face. One afternoon, they discovered a grove where the crystal trees grew in a perfect circle. Naya pulled him into the center, then began to move, not quite dancing, but something close. She extended her hand in invitation. Ethan, feeling slightly foolish but unable to resist, took it. She pulled him into the movement, her body close to his as they swayed to the harmonic singing of the trees. Her head tilted back, eyes sparkling with joy, and Ethan realized he'd never seen anyone so alive, so present. When she pressed closer, her cheek resting briefly against his chest, he wrapped his arms around her without thinking. Naya looked up at him, and the laughter faded into something deeper. Her markings pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. She raised one hand to his face, tracing his jawline with feather-light touches, her expression full of wonder and question. Ethan covered her hand with his, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm. Naya's breath hitched, her eyes widening, those swirling colors intensifying. She said something soft in her language, and though he didn't understand the words, the meaning was clear in her voice, her touch, the way she looked at him. As twilight fell and the twin moons rose, they sat together at the edge of a cliff overlooking the misty valleys. Naya leaned against his side, fitting perfectly beneath his arm. She traced idle patterns on his forearm, and Ethan marveled at how natural this felt, how quickly she'd become essential to him. She pointed at the stars emerging overhead, then at him, then at herself. Ethan understood. They were both travelers, both alone, but maybe not anymore. Naya placed her hand over his heart again as she had that first night. This time, she held it there, her eyes closing in concentration. Ethan felt warmth spreading through his chest, not painful, but intense, like sunlight breaking through clouds, like coming home. When she opened her eyes, they shimmered with unshed tears. She smiled that mysterious smile, but now Ethan could sense something behind it, longing, hope, and beneath it all, a sadness he didn't yet understand. He pulled her closer, and she came willingly, tucking her head beneath his chin. They sat like that as the stars wheeled overhead, two hearts beating in increasingly synchronized rhythm, while the moon sang its crystal songs around them.
Ethan's emergency beacon chirped to life on the fifth morning, its rhythm steady now that he'd managed repairs. Rescue would come within 3 days. The realization sat heavy in his chest. Naya sensed the change immediately. When she brought him breakfast, sweet fruit and nectar from the floating pods, her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her markings seemed dimmer, pulsing in slower, sadder rhythms. "Naya," he said softly, catching her hand. She looked at their joined fingers, then up at his face. He touched the beacon, then pointed at the sky. Her expression crumpled for just a moment before she schooled it into something calmer. She nodded, understanding. Of course she understood. She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. Ethan wanted to reach for her again, but sensed she needed space. Instead, he watched as she walked to the cave entrance and stared out at the mists, her silhouette small and unbearably lonely. That afternoon, Ethan explored deeper into the caves, looking for anything that might explain this place, this woman who'd captured his heart so completely. In a chamber lit by thousands of tiny luminous creatures, he found them, murals covering every surface. They depicted beings like Naya, with their silver markings and galaxy eyes. But these beings were shown in pairs, their hands touching, light flowing between them. In one mural, two of them stood with palms pressed together while energy swirled around them, healing a dying landscape. In another, they reached towards stars, seeming to pull light down from the heavens. And in the last mural, one figure stood alone, her markings dim, surrounded by darkness, waiting. "Starbinders," Naya's voice startled him. She'd followed him into the chamber, her expression resigned. She touched the mural of the paired beings, then touched her own chest. Then she gestured around the empty caves. Alone. Understanding crashed over Ethan like cold water. She was the last of whatever her people had been, these starbinders who could share emotions, heal worlds, touch the very fabric of reality. And she was alone. Naya approached him slowly, her eyes searching his face. She reached up tentatively, her fingers hovering near his temple, asking permission for something deeper than she'd shared before. Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. She pressed her fingertips to his temples, and the world exploded into sensation. Loneliness, centuries of it, watching her people fade one by one. Hope, the day his ship appeared in her sky. The prophecies she'd almost stopped believing. Fear, that he would leave, that she'd be alone again. And beneath it all, rising like a tide, love, deep, consuming love for this stranger who had fallen from the stars. Ethan gasped as the connection broke, staggering backward. Naya caught him, steadying him, her face wet with tears. He realized his own cheeks were damp too. "I felt everything," he whispered. "Naya, She pressed her fingers to his lips, shaking her head. She didn't want words. Instead, she took his hand and led him from the caves. They climbed for over an hour, ascending narrow paths carved into the mountainside. Finally, they emerged onto a plateau where the view stole Ethan's breath. The entire moon spread below them, wrapped in luminous mists, and above, the aurora danced overhead like living things, sheets of color that pulsed and swirled in patterns that seemed almost conscious. Naya spread her arms wide, and the lights responded, cascading down toward her in streams of violet and silver and gold. She turned to Ethan, her face radiant with reflected light. Then she stepped close, so close he could see every swirl of color in her galaxy eyes. She placed both hands on either side of his face and leaned her forehead against his. The world dissolved. He saw through her eyes. The first moment she spotted his ship falling through her sky, her heart leaping with impossible hope. He felt her nervousness as she approached his broken body, wondering if he was the one the prophecies spoke of. He experienced her joy at every smile, every touch, every moment they'd shared. And deeper still, her world dying, its core energy fading because starbinders needed pairs to function. One alone couldn't sustain the delicate balance. She showed him what would happen if nothing changed.
The lights would fade, the crystals would crumble, the singing trees would fall silent, this beautiful moon would become a tomb. But she also showed him what could be. Two souls linked, energy flowing between them, the world healing and thriving, a life together that would span centuries, their consciousness partially merged, able to feel each other's joy and pain as if it were their own. A choice. She was offering him a choice. When the vision faded, Ethan found himself on his knees, Naya kneeling before him, still holding his face. Tears streamed down both their cheeks. She smiled sadly, then pressed the softest kiss to his forehead. Then she stood and walked away, leaving him alone beneath the dancing lights to decide his future.
Ethan didn't return to the caves until dawn. He'd spent the night on the plateau watching the auroras dance while his mind spun through everything Naya had shown him. His crew would arrive in 2 days. They'd bring him home, back to his ship, his missions, his ordinary life among the stars. He'd file reports about this uncharted moon, and maybe someday other explorers would come. They'd find the caves empty, the lights fading, the singing trees falling silent. They'd never know what had been lost. Or he could stay. The enormity of it terrified him. To bind himself to Naya, to merge part of his consciousness with hers, to live for centuries on this isolated moon, it was madness. He'd known her less than a week. This couldn't be love, not real love. It was proximity, gratitude, the intoxicating strangeness of it all. Except he knew better. What he felt for Naya transcended time and logic. It was written in every shared glance, every gentle touch, every moment their hearts had beaten in sync. And what she'd shown him, her loneliness, her hope, her love, that was real too. More real than anything he'd ever known. When he finally descended to the caves, he found Naya sitting at the entrance, her knees drawn up, her markings dim. She looked up as he approached, and the vulnerability in her eyes nearly broke him. He sat beside her, not touching, and they watched the mists together in silence. "Show me again," he finally said, taking her hand. "Show me what it would mean. All of it." Naya hesitated, then nodded. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, directly over his heart, and closed her eyes. The visions came softer this time, more detailed. He saw them performing the binding ritual in a chamber deep beneath the moon's surface, where ancient crystalline structures pulsed with dormant energy. He felt what it would be like, her thoughts brushing against his like whispers, her emotions coloring his own. Not overwhelming, not consuming his identity, but there, always there, a constant companionship that went deeper than words could ever reach. She showed him the work they would do together, channeling energy through their bond to heal the moon's core, tending the crystal forests, exploring the vast cave systems that riddled the world. She showed him joy in simple moments, waking together beneath bioluminescent ceilings, dancing in the singing groves, discovering new wonders in this alien paradise. And she showed him love, deep and patient and endless, the kind of love that would grow over decades and centuries, nurtured by their unique connection. She showed him a future where loneliness was impossible, because they'd never truly be apart. But she also showed him the cost. Once bound, he couldn't leave. His physiology would change, adapting to sustain the energy flow between them. Earth's atmosphere would eventually become toxic to him. He'd never see another human face, never hear his language spoken. This moon would become his entire universe. When the vision faded, Ethan's cheeks were wet again. Naya pulled back, searching his face. She didn't ask, didn't plead. She simply waited, giving him the space to choose freely. "My crew," he said hoarsely. "When they come." Naya nodded. She understood. He needed to see them one last time, to say goodbye properly, if that was his choice. The next 2 days passed in a strange, dreamlike state.
They went through their routines, gathering food, maintaining the cave, exploring the forests, but everything felt weighted with unspoken possibility. Sometimes, Ethan would catch Naya watching him with such naked longing that his breath would catch. Other times, she'd turn away quickly, as if trying to protect herself from hoping too much. On the second night, they sat together beneath the stars, her body pressed against his side. Ethan wrapped his arm around her, feeling her heartbeat through her back. Without the conscious connection, he couldn't read her thoughts, but he didn't need to. He felt her trembling slightly, felt the way she gripped his hand like he might disappear. "Naya," he whispered. She looked up at him, those galaxy eyes shimmering. "Whatever happens, whatever I choose, you need to know that meeting you changed everything. You're the most remarkable being I've ever encountered." She touched his face tenderly, tracing the lines of his features as if memorizing them. Then she leaned up and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but when Ethan responded, pulling her closer, it deepened into something urgent and desperate. Naya's markings blazed with light, illuminating them both. Ethan felt heat rushing through him, felt that strange electricity multiplying until every point where they touched seemed to spark. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Naya's expression was fierce with love and fear and hope all tangled together. She pressed her forehead to his, and he felt the question she didn't voice. "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." Ethan held her through the night, neither of them sleeping, both acutely aware that dawn would bring his crew and force a decision that would echo through eternity. When the ship's engines rumbled overhead the next morning, Naya stood at the cave entrance, her face composed, but her markings pulsing erratically. Ethan squeezed her hand once, then walked out to meet his rescuers. Commander Reeves emerged from the landing craft, relief flooding her faces. "Cross! Thank God, we've been searching for days! Are you injured?" "I'm fine," Ethan said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "Better than fine, actually." Reeves studied him carefully, noting his healed wounds, his two bright eyes. "What happened here? This moon, the readings are unlike anything we've encountered. And is that—" She looked past him toward Naya, who stood like a silver shadow in the cave entrance. "Is that an indigenous life form?" "She is," Ethan said quietly. "Her name is Naya. And, Commander, I need to send a message back with you." The words spilled out, carefully chosen, rehearsed in his mind through the sleepless night. He told Reeves about the starbinders, about the dying moon, about prophecies and ancient bonds. He didn't tell her about the depth of what he felt for Naya. Some things were too vast for words. Reeves listened, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief to something like understanding. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You're staying," she finally said, not a question. "I'm staying." "Ethan, you realize what you're giving up. Your career, your family, everything you've known." "I know exactly what I'm choosing," Ethan interrupted gently. "And who I'm choosing." Reeves looked past him at Naya again, seeing how the alien woman watched Ethan with barely contained emotion. She sighed. "You're sure? Absolutely certain?" Ethan glanced back at Naya. Their eyes met across the distance, and he felt it, that pull, that recognition, that sense of rightness that defied all logic. Naya's hand pressed over her heart, and he felt the echo of it in his own chest. "I've never been more sure of anything."
Theron woke to the sensation of gentle warmth and the sound of distant music. For a confused moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then memory flooded back. The resonator, the bonding, Nasara. He opened his eyes to find her watching him, her face inches from his. They were still on the cavern floor where they'd collapsed, wrapped in each other's arms, but now covered with a blanket she must have retrieved while he slept. Her glow had returned to full strength, the patterns beneath her skin moving in intricate dances of gold and amber. "How long?" he asked, his voice rough. 6 hours.
I didn't want to wake you. You gave so much to make the connection work." Her hand traced his cheek tenderly. "Come, you need to see what you've helped create." She led him up the spiral steps and out onto the main platform. Theron stopped, struck speechless by the transformation. The gardens weren't just alive, they were transcendent. Every vine pulsed with vibrant bioluminescence. Flowers bloomed in cascades of color, and new growth spiraled upward from platforms that had been barren yesterday. The air itself seemed to shimmer with vitality, carrying that melodic humming he'd heard on waking. "The gardens are singing," Nasara said, joy radiating from her so strongly he could feel it without touching her. "The resonator is working perfectly. Your calculations were exact, and our connection provided the bridge the technology needed." Theron pulled her close, needing to feel her solidity, her realness. "I was so afraid we'd fail, that I have to watch you fade. Instead, you gave me life." She kissed him softly, a gesture that still sent pleasant shocks through his system. "But Theron, there is something you must understand. The resonator now depends on our bond. If we separate, if our connection weakens significantly, it will begin to fail again." He searched her luminous eyes, seeing the question there. "Are you asking if I plan to leave?" "I'm telling you that staying means binding yourself to this world, to these gardens, to me. Your ship could take you anywhere in the galaxy, back to your research, to other people, to a normal life." Her voice remained steady, but he felt her fear through their bond, the terror of hoping he'd stay, and the certainty that she couldn't ask him to sacrifice his freedom. He laughed, the sound echoing across the gardens. "Nasara, do you know what I've spent the last 15 years doing? Running from connection, choosing isolation because it felt safer than risking rejection or loss. I convinced myself I preferred being alone." He turned her to face the spectacular vista of gardens spreading out in all directions, now multiplying as seeds germinated and new growth spiraled upward from platforms that had been barren yesterday. "But the truth is, I was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely, and too stubborn to admit it. Then I found you. Someone who understands that loneliness, who sees me completely and doesn't ask me to be anything other than who I am." "You would give up exploring the galaxy?" she asked softly. "I'd be exploring something far more important. There's enough xenobotanical research here to occupy me for 50 years, and that's before we even considered trying to locate other Etherian sanctuary worlds that might need our help." He turned her to face him. "Besides, I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing something better. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us." The relief and joy that flooded through their bond nearly knocked him over. Nasara pulled him into a kiss that made the gardens flare even brighter, their happiness feeding the living light around them. When they finally broke apart, she was laughing and crying simultaneously, her tears leaving trails of golden luminescence. "I have lived 7 years believing I would die alone with my gardens. Now I have a partner, a bonded companion, someone who sees beauty and what others call strange. And I have a home," Theron said, the word feeling right for the first time in years. "A purpose beyond just cataloging and moving on. We'll document everything here, preserve your people's legacy, maybe even find ways to help other dying worlds." Over the following days, they established a permanent research station together. Theron modified his ship to serve as their primary laboratory and living quarters, integrated seamlessly with the garden platforms. He sent messages to the academic networks, announcing the discovery of Etherian gardens and requesting historical records that might help them locate other sanctuary worlds. At night,
They would walk through the gardens hand in hand, and their bond grew stronger as they learned to communicate through light and emotion as naturally as through words. The gardens responded to their happiness, growing lusher and more complex, creating new varieties of bioluminescent flora that had never existed before. Hybrids born from the unprecedented connection between human and Etherian. 3 months after that first meeting, Theron stood on their favorite platform at sunset, watching Nasara tend to a newly sprouted light vine. The golden hour painted her in warm tones, her alien beauty no longer strange to him, but simply hers, familiar, beloved, home. She looked up and smiled, that same gentle invitation she'd offered the first day. "Come closer," the smile said. "Share this moment with me." He went to her gladly, taking her hand and feeling their bond hum with contentment. Above them, the twin suns set in glory while the gardens prepared for their nightly illumination. Tomorrow they would continue their work, documenting and preserving, sending their findings across the galaxy. But tonight, they simply existed together. Two lonely souls who had found in each other something they neither knew they were searching for, a connection that transcended the boundaries of species, a love that grew in the space between stars, and a future they would build together, one luminous day at a time. The gardens sang around them, their melody a celebration of life renewed and love discovered, and in that moment, both Theron and Nasara knew they had found something rare and precious. Not just salvation, but belonging. Not just survival, but joy. Not just existence, but a reason to thrive. Together, they had become the bridge between worlds, and in doing so, had found their way home.